Hi, everyone. I'm Julia Salazar. I represent New York's 18th District in the State Senate, and I'm here today virtually with Zohran Mamdani, who is a state assembly candidate in Astoria, Queens. And we are going to talk about an issue that impacts communities in both of our respective districts, which is how this coronavirus pandemic is currently affecting cab drivers and rideshare drivers in our city. Zohran, do you want to talk a little bit about what you've been hearing from drivers in your district?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, as you said, I'm running for Assembly District 36, which covers Astoria, Ditmas, Steinway, and parts of Astoria Heights. And what I find interesting is sometimes in the popular conception of my district, it erases a lot of communities that have a thriving presence in our neighborhood. And one of those is a very large Bangladeshi, very large Arab population, sets of populations which are disproportionately represented amongst drivers in both yellow cab industry as well as ride-sharing industries like Uber and Lyft. And every day when I phone bank voters across our district, I invariably speak to an Uber driver, a yellow cab driver, a Lyft driver, and they speak to how this pandemic has not only impacted them in the sense that in the way that it's impacted everyone, but that it has had an impact on their industry, which is unique in that it has decimated the entire industry. And because of the employment classifications of so many of them, specifically Uber and Lyft drivers, that they have far less recourse than a typical employee might have. Because, while the federal government has included contractors in this stimulus package and the relief bill, and they can collect unemployment federally, in the long term, at a state level, we do not have any classification that recognizes their ability to get these kinds of employee benefits. And the inability to have that long-term sense of stability, the inability to really have a large-scale social safety net has meant that drivers are either forced to stay home, stay healthy, but live in a very precarious position where they do not know when they will be able to, next pay for their rent or next pay for their food for their family or their medicines, or go out, risk their lives and that of others around them in order to earn. And frankly, there were many drivers who have told me, that for weeks that generally, but weeks ago that the only place they could go and regularly get passengers would be the airport. And that would be probably the most dangerous place to go in the beginning stages of this pandemic. And that was the kind of decision they were being forced to make. And I think that, that's one of the big reasons I'm so excited about releasing this platform with you, because this is an issue that has by and large been kicked to the back burner by so many politicians and by so many candidates. And it's clearly an issue that can be the difference between food on the table for a family or everyone waiting in hunger. And so I really appreciate coming together to push the state to change its classification system, to also push the state to return certain surcharges to taxi cab drivers, as well as take decisive action on the amount of money that taxi cab medallion owners still owe to these predatory equity loan sharks, really. And I think that it's action that is necessary. It's action that has had to wait for too long. And I wanted to ask you, what has it been like in Albany advocating on these kinds of issues?
Yeah, it has been challenging in Albany. There is legislation, there are proposals regarding the gig economy, specifically on the classification of workers of workers who are currently not classified as workers under the law or as employees. And as a result, they miss out on unemployment insurance, on workers' compensation, on a range of benefits. The regulations, even with regard to their wages, are different because even though they deserve to be treated as workers, and they deserve just as any other workers to have those rights and those benefits, they are left out essentially because of technicalities, and it hurts the workers and is advantageous to companies like Uber and Lyft. And that's why I'm so excited that you're running for assembly and that you've partnered with me on this platform, because we really need more people in Albany who have the political will to do something about this, and who are representing the people who have stakes in this, right? I have a large Bangladeshi population in my community, mostly in East New York and Cypress Hills, and the majority of rideshare drivers, many yellow cab drivers as well, are Bangladeshi. And you know, it's not right that they've been disproportionately impacted by this issue. We recognize that during this crisis, workers in many different industries have been negatively impacted. But why we feel the need to really focus on these workers is because they have uniquely been left out of things like the CARES Act, the most recent federal stimulus. Many of these workers are, if they even have the opportunity to be eligible for relief through that stimulus, it's very, very challenging for them to be able to access it. And again, as you mentioned, they just shouldn't have to make this decision between whether or not they can support themselves, or whether or not they can keep themselves healthy and abide by public health standards that we all really need to collectively be honoring in this crisis. And so I really just wanted to ask you more about how you see this platform as a democratic socialist. Like, how do you see it consistent with your identity as a democratic socialist candidate and your campaign?
Absolutely. I think that what is so exciting about this is that it embodies that crucial idea about our political ideology, which is for the many, not the few. And, when we think about who would this impact, it would be the people who have been, in many ways, victims of predatory equity, in many ways, victims of, mass scale capital that seeks to extract wealth from working class labor. And it just so happens that this is also tied into an issue of racial representation, where, we are, for too long, the political establishment in our city, in our state, as we both well know personally, has also sought to only represent certain groups, has sought to pick candidates only from certain ethnic backgrounds, religious backgrounds, whatever it may be. It's not a coincidence that we come to this point in 2020 where we have an industry considered to be one of the most iconic images of New York City is the yellow cab, right? And now, even as it has faced so many challenges, still so many people rely on ride sharing to get around. And the disproportionate, number of drivers are South Asian. They are Muslim. And yet, so we see that all wrapped into the kind of symbolism of the city and of the state. But then when we look at the government makeup and the government representation of communities, we see that we've never had a South Asian representative at any level elected to office in New York City. We have close to 1 million Muslims in New York City, and only one has ever served in the New York State Assembly. And, while it is hard in the sense of how many young kids from these same communities that I belong to look at the state and do not see themselves reflected in it, it is also extremely difficult in that communities look at the state's legislative priorities and do not see their lives reflected in it, do not see the urgency of these matters reflected in the way in which their elected officials are legislating. And I think that it's that commitment to the many to specifically highlight the communities that have been left out of the political process and bring them forward. And also, by doing so, combating the same kind of capital that we seek to fight back against, and really ensure that dignity is the number one motive when it comes to legislating, not profit. And we do that by ensuring that we have proper classification of workers. We do that by ensuring that, medallion debt north of a certain amount is canceled because it's reflective of predatory lending. And we do that by ensuring that the state returns some surcharges back to drivers to keep them on their feet. Because, as you said, even for those who are eligible thanks to the CARES Act, to receive unemployment, I speak to so many drivers who say, I just call and call and call and call, and I haven't received anything at all.
Mhm.
And it is so clear that we need to take urgent action here at a local level to remedy this situation. And I really appreciate doing it in partnership with you, because you, in your time in the state Senate, have embodied what it is that we can do when we have a commitment to dignity, and the ways in which we can expand our political imagination. And I think that it is so important now that we reckon with the fact that Uber would be the largest employer in the state if we considered its contractors to be employees, and reckon with the responsibilities that these institutions have to their workers and to the city around us. And I wanted to ask you also, how have you seen this kind of impact the day-to-day realities of people in your district? You were talking about a large Bangladeshi population in Cypress Hills and East New York.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think what our office is hearing the most is that people have lost income as a result of the crisis, and that includes drivers, but it's by no means unique to drivers. One of the biggest challenges is that we connect people with the Department of Labor, and then, as you mentioned, they will spend an enormous amount of time on the phone or waiting to hear back. And they're not getting what they really need out of that interaction, and out of their correspondence with the Department of Labor. They're ultimately not getting the material assistance that they need. And that's why it's so important that we also invest more resources in the Department of Labor, and in the agencies that regulate things like this, and make sure that people actually are able to access the things that they are entitled to under the law, that they're already eligible for. So it's sort of a twofold thing that I am seeing the need for when I talk to constituents. On the one hand, a need for the law to change so that labor law is more inclusive of people, and so that they are actually treated as workers. But additionally, even for those who are doubtlessly considered to be workers, that the administration of unemployment insurance, workers' compensation, paid leave, all of these things, that the administration of it is actually effective, right? Yeah, and I also think that, to shift to more campaign side, and what we're doing in anticipation of the June election, I know that your campaign, like mine, is having regular phone banks, and doing all kinds of social distancing compliant voter outreach, and I just was wondering if you wanted to share a little bit more about that.
Absolutely. I think that the importance of this policy is built into the way that we have set up our campaign, because it's tied together by a belief in the necessity of amplifying the political power of marginalized communities. And so what I mean by that is that, as you very well know, we're not only fighting against the political establishment in office, but also in the way that we get there. And we're doing that by not having these typical consultants who would construct a voter universe consisting of regular primary voters, and would respond if we were to say, why shouldn't we include this Muslim voter, Muhammad, who voted, in 2008, or that Muslim voter, Akbar, who voted in 2012. And the response would be, well, we just can't count on them, and it's better to spend our time on people that we know will show up. And invariably what that means is that we have a much wider electorate in a place like Astoria than one that actually represents the neighborhood as a whole. And so what we are doing is we've done an analysis of Muslim and South Asian voters, and we've seen that both communities, obviously, which overlap, as I do in both of them, the turnout rate is less than 10%. And it's close to almost half of what the average turnout is of the entire district, which was 16.2% in the last election. We're trying to double the turnout of both communities. And the way that we do that is being very clear about our commitment to calling every single person. And so we do these phone banks, as you were saying. We phone bank every day from 6 to 9 p.m. And then on the weekends, we phone bank, at earlier hours. and we speak to people, and that's how I can tell you the stories that I'm hearing about from drivers, because I phone bank every day and I hear these stories firsthand, and it's heartbreaking. And so many people again and again will talk to you about being an Uber driver, a Lyft driver. And so I'd say for people who want to get involved in this, who want to help amplify this voice, I would say that what you should do is get involved in our phone banking, which you can find our events on our website, which is zohranforassembly.com. That's ZOHRAN for assembly.com. And you can also contribute to our campaign, because we want to make more than 40,000 calls, and each call costs 4 cents. And when it comes to then people who are excited about supporting, we want to also educate them in mail-in ballots, which seems to be the likelihood now, and how to do that. And that will also take money and take time. And these are the kinds of things we're fundraising for. So I would say that's a great way for people to get involved. And Julia, how would you say the best way is for your campaign?
Yeah, likewise. Even though I'm running for re-election, we're still running a grassroots campaign. And so the importance of volunteers really can't be overstated. If you go to salazarforsenate.com and you click on volunteer, then you can sign up also to phone bank. And additionally, there's a link to contribute if you're able to give. We're really proud to run a campaign that is fueled by small dollar donations and by everyday people rather than corporate PAC money or real estate money. And just as you were saying about turning out people who normally are maybe disillusioned with the political process, or are so used to seeing people who don't represent their interests or their community or their identity, turning those people out in this election and giving them a reason to come out is really what we want to do. So whether you are in Queens or Brooklyn or far away, we really want your support.
Absolutely. And the beauty of social distancing is you can do it from your home wherever you are. Thank you so much, Julia, for taking the time to speak with me. And I'm so excited to be on this platform with you.
Yeah, I'm so happy to be in this movement with you. Thanks, Zohran.
Woo!
Whee!